The moment my mother smiled and said, "Sweetheart, did you check your bag? Looks like you don't have a boarding pass anymore." I knew something was wrong. We were standing at the departure gate in Paris. A second later, she scanned her ticket, then my father's, then my younger sister Chloe's. Mine had somehow vanished. Confused, I reached for my mother's arm, but Chloe suddenly shoved me aside and slipped something into my open tote bag. Before I could react, security alarms exploded. Through the terminal, armed officers rushed toward me, shooting in French. My heart pounded as they searched my bag and pulled out a black passport that didn't belong to me. I turned desperately toward my family, expecting panic or concern, but they simply walked onto plane without looking back. They had planned this. Sitting inside a cold detention room hours later, I forced myself to think instead of panic. As a forensic accountant, I was trained to find patterns, and the fact quickly started lining up. My real passport had disappeared. A stolen passport had been planted in my bag. That passport had been reportedly missing only a day earlier, which automatically triggered a 48-hour identity investigation. Then the truth hit me. My grandmother's trust fund worth $2.5 million was scheduled to be released the next day. Buried deep inside the legal paperwork was an absentee clause stating that if the primary beneficiary could not be located within 24 hours of this release date, temporary control of the money would pass to the next closest relatives, my parents. They didn't want to embrace me. They wanted me trapped for exactly 2 days so they could gain access to my inheritance. It was cruel, calculated, and terrifyingly smart. While I sat behind glass, they were probably celebrating thousands of feet above the Atlantic. Then the detention room door opened. I accepted another officer, but instead a sharply dressed man stepped inside. His expensive charcoal suit and confident posture made him look like a billionaire than a visitor. He studied me carefully before speaking. "Emma Miller," he said, "top graduate from Wharton, expert in forensic investigation. The woman companies hire when money disappears." I sat up straighter. "Who are you?" I asked. "Sebastian Coy." He replied, "I run a venture capital firm in New York." "Then why are you here?" I said, "My family farmed me and stole my future. That's my problem." "What's your?" Sebastian's expression darkened. "My problem," he said quietly, "is that a billionaire dollar merger closes in 3 days, and someone is trying to steal that from me too." Sebastian explained that one of his business partners had been secretly stealing money from a $1 billion deal, but none of his auditors could prove it. He needed someone independent, someone skilled enough to uncover the truth. Sliding a contract across the table, he offered me a deal. His connection could get me released immediately and flown back to New York on his private jet. In exchange, I would investigate the missing money. I looked over the contract and then met his eyes. $30,000, I said. "And if my family fights my grandmother's will, you cover every legal expense." Sebastian's lips covered into a brief smile. "Done. Within minutes." I was walking out of detention, no longer feeling like a victim, but like someone stepping into a much bigger game. During the flight home, Sebastian worked on merger documents while I revived a detailed report his team had gathered about my family. The file confirmed exactly what I feared. The trust fund contained a clause that would temporarily hand control of my inheritance to my parents. If I could not be located before the release date, they had carefully planned everything. They didn't just want my money, they wanted complete control over it. As the jet crossed the Atlantic, anger slowly replaced my sadness. The more I thought about it, the more I realized the betrayal was not an insulated event. My entire life had been filled with moments where I sacrificed everything for my family while receiving nothing in return. One memory surfaced immediately. When I was 22, I had finally saved enough money to buy my first car. I used Honda Civic. Just 2 days later, my father Richard sat me down and tearfully admitted he owned thousands of dollars to dangerous gamblers. He begged me to help, telling me I was the only responsible person in the family. Believing I had no choice, I sold the car and gave him every dollar. He never thanked me. A week later, he was back at the racetrack gambling again. I turned another page and remembered the scholarship that changed my life. I had earned a full scholarship to one of the best business schools in the country. But my sister Chloe had recently gone through a painful breakup. My mother insisted Chloe needed a year long trip through Europe to recover emotionally, and somehow the responsibility for helping her always seemed to fall on me as I continued reading through the files. Even more painful memories came folding back. Years earlier, I had earned a full scholarship that could have covered my education, but my sister Chloe wanted to spend a year traveling across Europe after a breakup. My mother convinced me to give up the financial support, insisting that Chloe was emotionally fragile while I was strong enough to handle student loans. So why Chloe enjoyed vacation and luxury experience overseas. I worked a exhausting night shift to pay my tuition bills for years. I convinced myself that sacrificing for my family was an act of love. Now I finally saw the truth. They never viewed me as a daughter. I was their backup plan, their problem solver, the person they relied on whenever their lives fell apart. They had spent decades teaching me to be responsible, not so I could build my own future, but so I could keep reseeking theirs. Sebastian watched me quietly from across the cabin. You know exactly what are you to them, don't you? He asked. I nodded. An insurance company. The words felt cold but accurate. They believed they had destroyed me by abandoning me in Paris. But they forget that they were the reason I had learned how to survive difficult situations in the first place. Pulling out the laptop Sebastian had given me, I immediately began drafting document for a new company. He glanced at the screen and raised an eyebrow. You are setting a trap, are you not you? He asked. I didn't look up from the keyboard. They spent years making me cleaning up their disasters. I replied, now I am going to make sure they can never create another one. My sunrise will landed in New Jersey. and headed straight to Sebastian's penthouse in Manhattan. The moment we arrived, his team handed me access to a secure copy of my online accounts. What I found made my stomach tighten. While I was trapped overseas, Chloe had already launched a campaign against me. Her latest social media post showed her looking devastated, asking people to pray for me because I had supposedly suffered a serious mental breakdown in Paris. According to her story, our family was desperately trying to get me professional help. It was a perfect lie. By portraying me as unstable, she was not just explaining my disappearance, she was destroying my certibility. If I exposed what they had done, everyone would assume it was simple and was simple another symptom of my supposed breakdown. My family was not just trying to steal my inheritance anymore. They were trying to erase my reputation before I even got home. The deeper I dug, the worse it became. My mother, Caroline, had already contacted the trust administrator and sent documents claiming I was mentally unstable and being held by authorities overseas. Attached to her message was the airport incidents report, twisted into evidence that I was incapable of managing my inheritance. She argued that under the trust agreement, she and my father should immediately gain control of the funds to protect me from myself. They were not simply trying to take my money anymore, they were destroying my career and reputation at the same time. If clients believed I was unstable and involved in a would be over. Instead of fear, I felt a strange sense of calm. They still believed I was trapped and powerless. They had no idea I was sitting in a luxury penthouse in Manhattan, watching every move that made. Sebastian reviewed the document and shook his head. They have planned this carefully. By the time you change it in court, the money could already be gone. Stared at the city skyline outside the window. They don't want a legal fight, I said. They need fast cash. After reviewing their financial rewards, the region became obvious. My parents were buried under debt, multiple mortgages, enormous credit card balances, and gambling losses had pushed them to the edge. That's when an idea formed using Sebastian's resources. We created a new investment company called Atlas Capital Partners. On paper, it looked like a successful private investment firm with millions of dollars available for emergency lending. In reality, it was a bet. The company offered struggling borrowers immediate cash in exchange for valuable collateral. My parents would see it as the perfect solution to their financial problems. We designed a proposal offering to refinance their debt and provide quick funding, but there was one requirement: they would needed to use the trust fund as collateral. Since the trust legally belonged to me, they could only pledge it by officially swearing that I was incapable of handling my own affairs. The moment they signed those documents, they would be making a false statements and oath and exposing themselves to serious fraud charges. Sebastian smiled across his face. We were not forcing them into anything. We were simply giving them an opportunity and letting her agree to the rest. To make the offer appear legitimate, Sebastian brought in a corporate attorney named Daniel Reed, a man known for negotiating high stakes business deals. He gathered around the conference table and listened through the speakerphone as Daniel called my father. The ring rang twice before someone's answered, and suddenly the trap was ready to close. The trap worked perfectly when attorney Daniel Reed contacted my father. Richard sounded nervous and desperate. Daniel explained that Atlas Capital was willing to provide immediate funding to clear his debt, but only if he used the trust fund as collateral. The moment Daniel mentioned paperwork proving he had complete authority over the trust, my father eagerly agreed without hesitation. He claimed I was mentally unstable, unavailable, and incapable of managing my own affairs. He was willing to sign a phone statement saying whatever was necessary to get the money. After the call ended, everyone in the room understood what had happened. My father had just agreed to committed fraud in other to steal my inheritance. 2 hours later, my parents and my sister arrived at Atlas Capital's office, hidden behind one-way glass. I watched them celebrate before the deal was even complete. Champagne glasses cleaned. My sister Madison took smiling photos, and my parents discussed how they would spend the money. They truly believed they had won. When the documents were placed in front of them, I finally walked into the room. The smile disappeared instantly. My mother nearby dropped her glass. My father looked like he had seen a ghost. Calmly picking up the affidavit, I pointed out that signing it would mean lying under oath and committing serious finance fraud. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Madison tried one last move, holding up my stolen phone. She claimed she had accessed confidential business files and threatened to destroy my career unless I walked away from the inheritance. But she had made a fatal mistake. The phone had never been the weak point, it was evidence. I opened my laptop and displayed security records proving the device was in police custody overseas when the alleged access occurred. Every login, location, and timestamp export her actions. Instead of incriminating me, she had implicated herself in cybercrime and identify fraud. Her confidence vanished instantly. At that moment, a legal representative who had been observing the meeting confirmed that the signed document constituted fraud and false statement. Second later, investigator entered the room. My parents panicked. Madison dropped the phone. The celebration was over. They had spent years treating me like a backup plan, convinced I would always save them from the consequences of their choice. This time there was no rescue as officer escorted them away. I looked at them one final time. They had tried to take both my inheritance and my future, but in the end, they lost everything. 3 weeks later, I officially received control of my grandmother's trust fund and moved into a new office overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Sebastian and I ended our business agreement with mutual respect. For the first time in my life, I was completely free. A few days later, I booked a one way first class ticket to Paris. My family had always told me that family was the most important thing in the world. Standing at the airport with the boarding pass in my hand, I finally understood the truth. Sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away and build a future without the people who tried to destroy it.